3 weeks of deafness changed my life forever. Not because I lost my hearing, but because I got it back. When you can't hear, people think they can say anything. My daughter thought so too, and what I heard when I came home from the hospital made me wish I could still be deaf. But it also gave me the perfect opportunity for revenge. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The heart monitor's steady beep hit me like a symphony. After 3 weeks of absolute silence, that simple electronic pulse sounded more beautiful than any music Margaret and I had ever danced to. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling my own heartbeat synchronize with the machine's rhythm. "Mr. Brooks," Dr. Chen's voice came through crystal clear, not muffled, not distant, perfect. "Can you hear me now?" I nodded, afraid that speaking might break this miracle. The hearing test headphones still pressed against my ears, and every tone, every whisper, every breath registered with stunning clarity. My hands trembled as I pulled them off. It's all back," I whispered, then louder, marveling at the sound of my own voice. "Everything." Dr. Chen smiled, making notes on her tablet. The stylus scratched against the screen. Another sound I'd forgotten existed. "The inflammation has completely subsided. Your hearing is now testing at normal levels, across all frequencies." 3 weeks ago, that construction site accident had stolen my world of sound. The falling beam hadn't hit me, but the pneumatic drill's malfunction next to my ear had created some kind of temporary damage. Complete deafness, they'd said. Maybe permanent. But here I was, listening to the hospital's symphony. Elevator dings, footsteps in the corridor, distant conversations, the whoosh of automatic doors. Jessie would be so surprised. She'd been taking such good care of me, moving into the house to help while I recovered. My heart warmed thinking about her reaction. "I need to call my daughter," I said, reaching for my phone. "Actually, let's complete the discharge process first," Dr. Chen said. "We want to make sure everything's properly documented." I signed papers with shaking hands, barely reading the words. The pen scratched against paper. Another forgotten sound. The nurse, Patricia, explained my follow-up appointments, but I was only half listening. I kept thinking about Jessie's face when I walked through the front door and called out her name. "Take it easy for the first few days," Patricia was saying. "Your brain needs time to readjust to processing all these sounds again." I thanked them both and walked toward the elevator, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. Each sound felt like a gift being unwrapped. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the parking garage. Even that tiny click seemed profound. My Honda Civic waited in the same spot where Jessie had dropped me off 3 weeks ago. I'd been so scared then, facing the possibility of permanent deafness. Now, starting the engine, I nearly laughed at the familiar rumble. The radio came on automatically, some classic rock station Margaret used to love. "Everything happens for a reason," I said aloud, repeating something Margaret used to tell me during hard times. My voice sounded strange in the car's enclosed space, but wonderfully clear. The 15-minute drive home passed in a blur of rediscovered sounds. Traffic hummed around me, other engines revving, brakes squeaking, horns honking in the distance. I'd forgotten how noisy the world was, how alive. My neighborhood looked the same as always, neat suburban houses with their carefully maintained lawns and driveways. Mrs. Peterson was gardening next door, her rake scraping against the concrete. 2 houses down, children played in their backyard, their laughter carrying on the March breeze. A dog barked somewhere, and another answered from across the street. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the 2-story colonial house Margaret and I had bought 30 years ago. Jessie's car was parked beside the walkway. She must be inside, probably preparing dinner or watching her afternoon shows. My hand hesitated on the door handle. Should I call out as soon as I entered, or should I surprise her? Maybe find her in the kitchen and just start talking normally. Watch her face transform with joy and amazement. I decided on the surprise. Walking up the front steps, I heard voices from inside. Jessie and Chris talking in what sounded like the kitchen. Perfect. I could surprise them both. I slipped my key into the lock as quietly as possible and eased the front door open. The voices became clearer as I stepped into the hallway. "God, that old burden is back home again." Jessie's voice carried from the kitchen, sharp with irritation. I froze, my hand still on the doorknob, The words hit me harder than that falling beam ever could have. Burden? Chris's voice followed, equally clear. At least the insurance money helped with his medical bills. Could have been worse. My legs felt suddenly weak. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, hardly breathing. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe I'd misheard something. My hearing was just returning after all. But Jesse's next words cut through any hope of misunderstanding. I just want this whole thing over with. 3 weeks of pretending to care about his every need. I'm exhausted. The world tilted around me. These were my daughter's words, my daughter's voice, speaking about me like I was some unwanted obligation. The daughter I'd supported through college, helped through her divorce, welcomed into my home whenever she needed help. I remained perfectly still in that hallway, listening to the two people I'd trusted most in the world, realizing they had no idea I could hear every word they were saying. My chest felt like someone had reached inside and twisted everything around. The hallway seemed to stretch and contract with each heartbeat as Jesse's words echoed in my mind. That old burden. 3 weeks of believing she was there because she loved me, because she wanted to help her father through the worst crisis of his life. I'd been such a fool. My legs threatened to give out, but I forced myself to stay upright, pressed against the wall. I needed to hear more. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made any decisions. Moving carefully along the hallway, I positioned myself closer to the kitchen doorway. Their conversation continued, and each word felt like another nail in the coffin of my trust. Sunset Manor has good reviews, Jesse was saying, and it's not too expensive. The insurance settlements should cover the initial deposit. Chris chuckled, a sound that had once seemed friendly. Once he's out of here, we can finally start renovating this place. New kitchen, maybe knock out that wall between the dining room and living room. The realtor said it could add $50,000 to the value, Jesse added. Maybe more, depending on what we do with the master bathroom. They were planning my life like I was already dead, discussing my house like it was already theirs. I gripped the wall so hard my knuckles went white, fighting to keep my breathing silent, but they weren't finished. Think he suspects anything? Chris asked. Are you kidding? He can't hear a thing. Poor old man just sits there nodding and smiling while I write him notes. It's actually kind of pathetic. The contempt in her voice, my own daughter's voice, made my stomach turn. I thought about all those notes she'd written over the past 3 weeks, all those exaggerated smiles and gentle pats on my shoulder. Performance, all of it. I had to test this. I had to see just how good their acting really was. Taking a deep breath, I coached myself silently. Act confused, act grateful. Watch their faces and see how well they can lie to someone they think can't catch them. I walked into the kitchen, making sure my footsteps were slightly heavier than usual, like someone uncertain of their balance. Jesse and Chris were sitting at the kitchen table, and their transformation was immediate and complete. "Dad!" Jessie jumped up, her face instantly flooding with what looked like genuine concern. She rushed over and took my arm gently. "How are you feeling? You look tired." The same voice that had called me a burden 60 seconds ago now dripped with fake sweetness. I let myself lean into her touch, playing the part of the grateful, confused father. Chris raised his voice unnecessarily, the way people do when they think someone can't hear properly. "Hey there, Thomas. How did the appointment go?" I nodded and shrugged, then pointed to my ears with a questioning expression. Jessie immediately grabbed a notepad from the counter. She'd gotten quite good at this routine over the past 3 weeks. She wrote, "Doctor says hearing might return soon. That's wonderful news." I read the note, letting hope flood my expression. Inside, I cataloged every detail of her performance. The way she widened her eyes to look excited. The way she squeezed my shoulder like she was sharing in my joy. The way Chris nodded enthusiastically beside her, as if he cared about anything other than when I'd be out of his way. Chris leaned forward and wrote his own note. "Maybe we should start looking into care options for when you're feeling stronger. Just temporary, until you're fully recovered." Jesse added quickly, writing below his words, "Just so you have help with medications and physical therapy. Nothing permanent." I nodded eagerly, like this sounded like wonderful news. Inside, I noted how smoothly they'd transitioned from discussing nursing homes for my convenience to presenting it as temporary medical care. They'd thought this through. For the next few minutes, I played my part perfectly. I pointed at things and looked confused when they responded verbally. I nodded gratefully when Jessie wrote down questions about whether I was hungry or needed anything. I even managed what I hoped looked like a tired but contented smile when Chris patted my back and wrote, "We're so glad you're okay." Every gesture felt like swallowing poison, but I forced myself to maintain the performance. I needed to know more. I needed to understand exactly what they had planned and how long I had before they tried to execute it. Finally, I pointed upstairs and wrote my own note. Tired, going to rest. Jessie actually hugged me and said loudly, "Of course, Dad. You rest as much as you need to." I walked slowly toward the stairs, feeling their eyes on my back. Just before I reached the first step, I heard Chris's voice, much quieter now, but still perfectly clear to my restored hearing. He bought it completely. I climbed those stairs one deliberate step at a time, my hand gripping the banister to keep from shaking. When I reached my bedroom, I closed the door quietly and sat on the edge of the bed Margaret and I had shared for 30 years. The house felt different now. The walls that had always meant safety and family now felt like a trap. The daughter I'd raised and loved had become a stranger wearing Jessie's face, and I was apparently nothing more than an obstacle between her and my money. I stared at the framed photo on my nightstand, Jessie at her college graduation, her arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning at the camera. That girl was gone, if she'd ever really existed at all. But I was far from helpless. They thought they were dealing with a confused, deaf old man who would gratefully accept whatever scraps of care they threw his way. They had no idea what they'd awakened. Margaret's wedding ring still sat in the small dish on my nightstand. I picked it up with trembling fingers, remembering how she used to twist it when she was thinking. She would have known what to do about Jessie. She always saw through people better than I did. From downstairs, I could hear their voices continuing in the kitchen. They thought they had all the time in the world to plan my future. I set Margaret's ring back and moved carefully toward my bedroom door. The old house had excellent acoustics. I'd helped design some renovations myself 20 years ago. The heating vent near the stairs carried sound from the kitchen beautifully, and if I positioned myself just right in the hallway, I could hear everything. I tested each step, remembering which floorboards creaked. The third step groaned on its left side, but the right edge stayed silent. Knowledge from decades of living here, now serving a purpose I'd never imagined. "Sunset Manor is $4,800 monthly," Chris was saying when I reached position, "but Medicare covers most if we get the right medical evaluations." Jessie's voice carried clearly through the vent. "The realtor said we could get at least $470 for this place. After the mortgage payoff, that leaves us $320 for the down payment on that house in Whitefish." My house? The home Margaret and I had built our life in, where we'd raised our children, where she'd taken her last breath. They were discussing it like a commodity. "What's the timeline?" Chris asked. 2 months, maybe less. We need to establish a pattern of incompetence first. Document incidents, memory issues. Dr. Henderson owes me a favor from when I helped him buy that Camaro. He could write up whatever evaluation we need. I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles went white. They weren't just planning to abandon me. They were planning to fabricate evidence of mental decline. My own daughter was plotting to destroy my reputation and independence. Footsteps moved across the kitchen floor, and Jessie's voice grew closer. I should check on him, make sure he's not getting suspicious. I moved quickly but silently back to my bedroom, positioning myself as if I'd been napping. I'd learned to control my breathing during those long nights watching over Margaret. Jessie's footsteps climbed the stairs. Avoiding that creaky third step, I noticed. "Dad?" She spoke loudly. "I brought you some tea." I opened my eyes slowly, blinking as if disoriented. Jessie stood in my doorway holding a steaming mug, her face arranged in loving concern that made my stomach turn. She set the mug on my nightstand, right next to Margaret's ring dish. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, my wife's memory displaced by my daughter's deception. "You looked tired earlier," Jessie said, speaking slowly. "Are you feeling okay?" I nodded and reached for the notepad. I wrote, "Thank you. You're so good to me." The words tasted like poison, but Jessie's smile brightened. She patted my shoulder with what might have looked like affection to anyone who couldn't see the calculation in her eyes. Rest as much as you need, Dad. Chris and I are taking care of everything. After she left, I lay still, listening to her footsteps retreat. Then I heard her voice again, reporting back to Chris. He's completely clueless, just like we planned. Drinking his tea like a good little patient, Chris chuckled. Perfect. Maybe we should accelerate the timeline. Why wait 2 months? Henderson could do the evaluation next week. We say Dad's been having episodes, wandering confused, forgetting to eat, leaving the stove on, standard dementia stuff. Jesse paused, and I found myself holding my breath. That could work, if we document a few more incidents over the next couple weeks. Exactly. By month's end, we could have him placed and be looking at house listings. I stared at the ceiling, mind racing. They weren't just betraying me. They were planning to erase me, strip away my independence, my dignity, my home, everything that made life worth living. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought they were dealing with a helpless, deaf old man who would accept whatever fate they chose. They had no idea that every word they spoke was building my case against them. I reached for my wallet and pulled out a business card I'd kept there for 3 years. Robert Henley, attorney at law. He'd handled Margaret's estate and had been encouraging me to update my own will. Tomorrow, I would call Bob. Tonight, I would listen to every word they said. They wanted to play games with an old man's life. I was about to show them exactly how dangerous that could be. The business card felt substantial between my fingers as I walked to my study, the room where I'd managed our family finances for 30 years. Robert Henley's number was printed in conservative blue ink, matching the folder where I kept important documents. I pulled open the filing cabinet and began searching through years of organized records. Bank statements, tax returns, receipts, the paper trail of a life spent providing for others. What I found made my chest tight with pain. Jesse's wedding receipt, $35,000. I remembered cashing out part of my 401k, working overtime for months to rebuild what I'd lost. Make it perfect, Dad, she'd said. Mom would have wanted everything beautiful. Student loan statements, $28,000 in payments I'd made after her graduation. Jesse crying in my kitchen, 20 years old and terrified. Dad, I can't finish school. The debt is too much. I'd written those checks without hesitation. Apartment down payment, $15,000. Another chunk of my retirement, another sacrifice made gladly because she was my daughter and needed help. But here was something else. Margaret's medical bills from those final months. $67,000 in treatments insurance hadn't covered. Bills I'd paid alone while Jessie found excuses to stay away. I can't handle seeing her like this, Dad. The numbers blurred as my hands shook. Over $100,000 given freely to a daughter who now called me a burden. I pulled out a photo from Jessie's college graduation. She stood between Margaret and me, arms around both our shoulders, smile radiant with possibility. I couldn't have done this without you, Dad, she'd whispered. I'll never forget how much you sacrificed. The memory triggered others, flooding back like water through a broken dam. Jessie at 19, sobbing over student debt. Everyone else has parents who can help them. Not thinking about the extra shifts I was already working, the vacation I'd canceled to afford her textbooks. Jessie at 25, planning her wedding. You'll always have a home with us, Dad. Always. That's a promise. Chris nodding beside her, his thank you rehearsed, even then. Jessie at 32, missing Margaret's funeral planning because Chris had a work event. You understand, don't you? It's a big promotion opportunity. Mom would want him to go. Standing alone in the funeral director's office while my daughter networked 2 states away, and Margaret, in those final weeks, asking the question that broke my heart. Where's Jessie today? Me, lying with practiced ease. She'll come tomorrow, sweetheart. She's just busy. Margaret nodding, accepting the lie because she wanted to believe her daughter cared. The pattern was clear now. Jessie, taking, always taking, while offering promises as currency for future needs. And me, enabling every request because I confused generosity with love. I opened my current bank statement and compared it to nursing home costs. Sunset Manor at $4,800 monthly would consume my savings in less than 4 years, but that wasn't their concern. They wanted the house money up front for their new life in Whitefish. When had Jessie last called just to talk? When had she asked about my day, my health, my loneliness. Every conversation ended with a request: help with Chris's car payment, loan money for vacation, contribute to their anniversary cruise. Margaret had seen the truth even then, had tried to warn me in her gentle way. "You're creating a dependency, Thomas," she'd said after I'd paid for Jessie's third car repair in 6 months. "She needs to learn to solve her own problems." "She's our daughter," I'd argued. "We help family." "There's a difference between helping and enabling," Margaret had replied, "and there's a difference between gratitude and entitlement." Now, surrounded by evidence of my misguided generosity, I understood what my wife had been trying to tell me. Jessie hadn't learned to appreciate my help. She'd learned to expect it. When I became the one needing care, she'd seen only a burden blocking her access to what she'd always considered rightfully hers. I looked at the photo one more time, then placed it face down in the drawer. The girl in that picture was gone. In her place was a woman who would fabricate mental illness to steal my independence, who would conspire with a doctor to declare me incompetent, who would sell the home where her mother died to fund her own dreams. But I wasn't confused. I was angry, and I was going to call Robert Henley first thing in the morning. I reached for my address book, flipping to the H section where I'd written his home number years ago. Some conversations couldn't wait for business hours. Jessie had taught me a valuable lesson about family loyalty. Now I was going to teach her one about consequences. I woke the next morning with Robert Henley's business card still clutched in my hand. The numbers on my alarm clock read 7:30 a.m., and I could already hear Jessie moving around in the kitchen below, preparing what she probably considered her daily performance of caring daughter. From my bedroom window, I watched Chris loading something into their car. Their voices drifted up through the morning air, something about shopping and errands. Perfect. I needed them gone for what I had planned. I made my way downstairs, moving with the careful, uncertain steps of someone still adjusting to hearing loss. Jessie looked up from the stove where she was scrambling eggs, her smile bright and artificial. "Good morning, Dad," she called out loudly. "I made your favorite breakfast." I nodded gratefully and pointed to my ears with a questioning expression. She grabbed her ever-present notepad and wrote, "Chris and I are going shopping this morning. Will you be okay alone for a few hours?" I wrote back, "Yes. Thank you for taking such good care of me." The lie tasted bitter, but Jessie's pleased expression told me she bought it completely. She kissed my forehead, a gesture that once would have warmed my heart and now made my skin crawl. "We'll be back around 3, she said, speaking slowly and clearly. "There's soup in the refrigerator if you get hungry." After they left at 10:45, I waited exactly 15 minutes before reaching for the phone. Some habits from my engineering days died hard. Always double-check your measurements, always verify your timeline, always have a backup plan. Robert Henley answered on the second ring. "Henley Law Office." "Robert, it's Thomas Brooks. I need to change my will immediately." There was a pause. "Thomas, I thought you were having hearing difficulties." "It's complicated. Can you see me today? It's urgent." "Well, I suppose I could fit you in around 11:30. But Thomas, are you certain you're—" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The drive to downtown Missoula took 12 minutes. Robert's office sat in a converted Victorian house on West Alder Street, the same building where he'd helped me navigate Margaret's estate 5 years ago. Mrs. Patterson, his secretary, looked surprised to see me walking in unassisted. "Mr. Brooks, how wonderful that you're feeling better," she said, speaking at normal volume. "Much better, thank you." Robert emerged from his inner office, a tall man with graying temples who'd been handling my legal affairs for over a decade. His handshake was firm, his expression concerned. "Thomas, I have to ask, are you experiencing any cognitive difficulties? Any confusion or memory issues?" I looked him directly in the eyes. "Robert, I need you to change my will so that everything goes to Michael. Everything. The house, the savings, the investments, all of it. And Jessie? Jessie gets $1,000, for reasons she will understand." Robert's eyebrows rose slightly, but he'd been a lawyer long enough to know when not to probe. "This is quite a dramatic change from your current will. Are you absolutely certain?" "Draw up the papers. I'll sign them today." For the next hour, we worked through the details. The house valued at $450,000, my savings account with $180,000, my investment portfolio worth another $120,000, a total estate of approximately $750,000. All of it now destined for Michael in Seattle instead of the daughter who'd called me a burden. "I'll need witnesses for the signing," Robert said, reviewing the final draft. "Use your staff. And Robert, I want a copy to take home with me today." That's unusual, but certainly doable. By 1:15 p.m., the new will was signed, witnessed, and filed. I walked out of Robert's office with a sealed envelope containing a copy, feeling lighter than I had in weeks, not because of what I'd taken away from Jessie, but because of what I'd taken back, control over my own life. At home, I placed the envelope prominently on the kitchen counter, right where Jessie would see it when she returned from shopping. Then I positioned myself in the living room with the newspaper, settling into my recliner where I could hear everything that happened in the kitchen. At 2:45 p.m., I heard their car doors slam in the driveway. Jessie's voice carried through the front door. "Hope he didn't try to cook anything while we were gone." The front door opened, followed by the rustle of shopping bags and footsteps heading toward the kitchen. Then silence. Then a sharp intake of breath that could have cut glass. The envelope crackled as Jessie tore it open. I could hear every sound from my position in the living room. The rip of paper, the rustle of documents, then absolute stillness that seemed to stretch forever. "Chris!" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Chris, get in here. Now!" Footsteps pounded across the kitchen floor. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a... Look at this!" Papers rustled frantically. "That old bastard changed his will." I held my breath, straining to catch every word while maintaining my sleeping pose behind the newspaper. "What do you mean, changed it?" Chris's voice was sharp with alarm. Jessie read aloud, her voice shaking with rage. "To Michael Brooks, my son, I leave my entire estate, including but not limited to my residence at 847 Maple Drive, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, and personal property." "That can't be legal. When did he do this?" "It's dated today." "Today, Chris?" "While we were out buying groceries like good little caretakers, he was downtown signing away our future." A chair scraped against the floor, followed by the sound of someone pacing. "How much are we talking about?" "The house alone is worth $450, plus his savings, his investments." Jessie's voice cracked. "We just lost over $700,000 to my brother who hasn't visited in 2 years. There has to be a way to challenge this. Mental incompetence, undue influence, something." Jessie's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Oh, there's more. Listen to this gem. To Jessica Brooks Miller, my daughter, I leave the sum of $1,000, for reasons she will understand." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of heavy breathing. "For reasons she will understand," Chris repeated slowly. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means he knows." Jessie's voice had gone cold, calculating. "Somehow that senile old man figured out what we were planning." "That's impossible. He can't hear a damn thing. We've been talking right in front of him for weeks. Then explain this." Papers slammed down on the counter. "Explain how a confused, deaf old man managed to get himself to a lawyer's office and rewrite his entire will without us knowing." I forced myself to breathe, slowly, evenly, maintaining the rhythm of someone peacefully napping. Every instinct screamed at me to smile, to laugh, to reveal the beautiful trap I'd set. But the game was far from over. Okay, Chris said, his voice taking on a forced calm. "Let's think about this logically. Maybe he's not as out of it as we thought. Maybe he's been testing us." "Testing us?" Jessie's voice rose dangerously. "Testing us by pretending to be deaf while we planned his future? That manipulative son of a—" "Keep your voice down. He's right in the next room." "I don't care if he hears me. If he's been playing games, then the games are over." Footsteps moved toward the living room. I closed my eyes completely and let the newspaper droop slightly in my hands. The picture of an elderly man dozing in his chair. "Dad?" Jessie's voice was sickeningly sweet again, but I could hear the strain underneath. "Dad, are you awake?" I stirred slowly, blinking in confusion as I looked up at her. Her face was flushed, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Oh, Jessie, did you have a good shopping trip?" She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for any sign of deception. "Dad, did you go anywhere today? While we were out, I tilted my head, looking genuinely puzzled. Go somewhere? No, I stayed right here. Why would I go anywhere? You didn't visit anyone? Make any phone calls? Phone calls? I touched my ears with a sad smile. Sweetheart, I can't hear well enough for phone calls right now. You know that. Jessie's jaw tightened, but she forced her expression back into caring concern. Of course, I forgot. I'm sorry, Dad. She turned and walked back to the kitchen, and I heard her urgent whisper to Chris. Either he's the best actor in the world, or we're missing something. What do you want to do? Call Dr. Henderson. Tell him we need those papers tomorrow, not next week. If Dad's playing games, we'll show him exactly how this game ends. And if he really is confused? If this will thing is just some kind of coincidence? Jessie's laugh was cold as winter wind. Then he won't remember signing it anyway, will he? Either way, by Friday he'll be declared incompetent, and will contest this will as the product of a diseased mind. I sat in my chair, newspaper trembling slightly in my hands, and felt a smile pull at the corners of my mouth. The sound of Jessie stabbing numbers into the kitchen phone carried clearly to my position in the living room. She was calling someone, and from the way she kept clearing her throat and pacing, I could tell she was preparing for a difficult conversation. Michael, thank God you answered. Her voice was high and strained. No, everything is not okay. Dad has completely lost his mind. I shifted slightly in my chair, angling myself to hear every word while maintaining my sleeping pose. This was exactly what I'd been waiting for. He changed his will, Michael. Everything goes to you now. The house, the savings, everything. He's cut me out completely except for some insulting $1,000 token. I could hear Michael's voice faintly through the phone, asking questions, but Jessie's responses told me everything I needed to know about his reaction. When? Today? While Chris and I were out buying groceries like good little caretakers, he was downtown signing away my future. Jessie's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine tears. I've sacrificed everything to take care of him, Michael. Everything. I moved in here, gave up my own life, and this is how he repays me. She was good. I had to give her that. If I hadn't heard her true feelings with my own ears, I might have believed the performance myself. He's not mentally competent anymore, Michael. You have to understand that. This will... It's the product of a diseased mind. You need to refuse the inheritance. It should be split fairly between us. Michael's response must have been longer this time, because Jessie fell silent, and I could see her face growing redder through the kitchen doorway. Good reasons? She finally exploded. What good reasons could he possibly have? I'm his daughter. I've been taking care of him while you live your comfortable life in Seattle. Another pause, and then her voice turned dangerously cold. How dare you judge me, Michael? You visit once a year if we're lucky, send a Christmas card, and suddenly you're the expert on what Dad needs? I heard the phone slam down, followed by the sound of Jessie's angry footsteps. Perfect timing. I stirred in my chair and looked around with the confused expression of someone just waking up. Jessie? Was someone on the phone? I thought I heard voices. She whirled around, her face still flushed with rage, but immediately tried to rearrange her features into something resembling concern. Oh, Dad. Yes, I was just talking to Michael. I blinked at her, touching my ears with a puzzled expression. Michael? My son Michael? Is everything all right? You look upset. Dad, we need to talk about your will. About the changes you made today. I stared at her blankly. My will? I don't understand. What changes? I could see the frustration building behind her eyes as she realized she'd have to explain everything to someone she believed couldn't hear properly, and was becoming increasingly confused. Never mind, Dad. It's complicated. Why don't you just rest? If you're sure everything's all right, I said, standing slowly, I think I'll go lie down. All this excitement has me feeling tired. I made my way upstairs, moving with the careful steps of an elderly man, but once I reached my bedroom and closed the door, I moved with purpose. My cell phone was in the nightstand drawer, a phone Jessie didn't even know I had. I dialed Michael's number from memory. Hello? His voice was cautious. Michael, it's Dad. There was a long pause. Dad? Jessie said you were having hearing problems. How are you calling me? Son, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you will shock you, but I need you to keep this conversation between us. Can you promise me that? Of course, Dad. What's going on? I took a deep breath. Michael, I can hear every word you're saying perfectly. My hearing came back 3 days ago, completely restored. But I haven't told Jesse because... I paused, knowing this next part would be hard for him to hear, because I discovered what she really thinks of me. What do you mean? She called me that old burden, Michael. I heard her and Chris planning to put me in a nursing home so they could sell this house and buy property in Whitefish with my money. Michael's sharp intake of breath was audible even through the phone. Dad, are you absolutely certain about this? Son, I heard every word. They've been planning this for weeks, maybe months. They even have a doctor friend who's going to forge medical evaluations to have me declared incompetent. The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Michael, are you there? I'm here, Dad. I'm just processing this. That phone call Jessie just made, she was trying to get me to refuse the inheritance, wasn't she? That's exactly what she was doing. She wants you to think I'm losing my mind so you'll voluntarily give up what I chose to leave you. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have known something was wrong. I should have visited more often. You have your own family, son. I understood that. But now I need your help. From downstairs I could hear Jessie's voice again, talking urgently with Chris. They were planning something, and from the tone it wasn't good. Michael, they're moving faster than I expected. I think they're going to try something tomorrow. Michael, I can hear every word you're saying perfectly, I said into the phone, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to reveal. 3 days ago, my hearing came back completely, but I've been pretending to be deaf because of what I discovered about your sister. Dad, if you can hear, why didn't you tell Jessie? Why keep pretending? Because the first thing I heard when I came home from the hospital was Jessie calling me that old burden while discussing plans to put me in Sunset Manor. She calculated exactly how much my house would be worth after they sold it, $470,000 after the mortgage payoff. They want to use my money to buy a place in Whitefish. Michael's voice was tight with disbelief. She actually said that? Called you a burden? Those were her exact words. But that's not the worst part, son. They have a doctor friend named Henderson who's going to create forged medical evaluations declaring me mentally incompetent. They plan to have me declared unfit and then contest any legal decisions I'd made. Jesus, Dad, that's elder abuse. That's fraud. Now you understand why I changed the will. I had to protect myself before they could execute their plan. But Michael, there's more. Tonight I heard them say Dr. Henderson confirmed Friday morning. They're accelerating their timeline. I could hear Michael breathing heavily, processing the full scope of his sister's betrayal. Dad, I feel sick. All those years you supported her, paid for her wedding, helped with her student loans, everything. And this is how she repays you. Your mother always saw through Jessie's act. I should have listened to Margaret more carefully. What do you need me to do? Should I come there? I can take Friday off work. Not yet, son. When Jessie calls you back, and she will, I want you to play along. Tell her you're concerned about my mental state. Maybe suggest you're thinking of coming to visit this weekend. You want me to lie to her? I want you to give her enough rope to hang herself with. She's going to call you again, probably tonight. She's desperate now, and desperate people make mistakes. From downstairs came the sound of urgent voices. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. Hold on, Michael. They're planning something. Jessie's voice carried clearly up through the heating vent. Dr. Henderson confirmed Friday morning at 10. He'll do the evaluation here at the house. Chris responded, What if the old man refuses to cooperate? He won't have a choice. Henderson will say he's displaying signs of dementia, confusion, memory loss, inability to make rational decisions. With the will change as evidence of mental instability, we'll have grounds for a competency hearing. And Michael? Michael's having doubts about Dad's mental state. I planted the seeds tonight. If I call him back tomorrow with more concerns, he might even support having Dad evaluated. I returned to the phone, my voice grim. Michael, did you hear any of that? Enough. Dad, they're planning to have you declared incompetent on Friday morning. We can't let that happen. No, we can't. But I have an idea. When Jessie calls you tomorrow, I want you to sound worried about me. Tell her you think an evaluation might be a good idea. Dad, I don't like lying to family. Son, She stopped being family the moment she decided to steal my independence and sell my home. She's counting on your decency to help her commit fraud." Michael was quiet for a moment. "You're right. What else do you need me to do?" "Keep playing the concerned brother until I give you the signal. And, Michael, document everything she tells you. Every lie, every manipulation. We might need it later." "What are you planning, Dad?" I looked around my bedroom. Margaret's jewelry box on the dresser, our wedding photo on the nightstand, the life we'd built together in this house that Jessie wanted to sell. "I'm planning to remind your sister exactly who she's been underestimating. She thinks she's dealing with a confused, helpless old man. Tomorrow, she's going to discover just how wrong she's been. Be careful, Dad. If she's desperate enough to commit fraud, there's no telling what else she might do. Don't worry about me, son. I survived 30 years as a construction engineer and 5 years of grief. I can handle one greedy daughter and her worthless husband." After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, listening to Jessie and Chris planning their final assault on my freedom. They had no idea their victim had been listening to every word, documenting every lie, and preparing his own surprise. Through the kitchen window blinds, I watched Jessie and Chris load shopping bags into their 2018 Ford Escape. Jessie was gesturing frantically at something on her phone while Chris checked his watch for the third time in 2 minutes. "We'll be back by 2 p.m., I heard Chris call toward the house, though they thought I couldn't hear him. "Don't forget, Dr. Henderson comes tomorrow at 10 sharp. Jessie's voice carried across the driveway in that artificially sweet tone she'd perfected over the past few days. "Dad, we're going shopping. Back soon." I remained motionless behind the blinds until their car disappeared around the corner. Then I allowed myself a smile. 3 hours, more than enough time to prepare their farewell gift. I walked slowly through the house, taking inventory. Jessie had made herself quite comfortable in the guest bedroom she'd claimed as her own. Her dresser drawers overflowed with expensive clothes, silk blouses, designer jeans, jewelry that glittered even in the dim light. All purchased, I noticed from the receipts scattered on her nightstand, with credit cards that showed my address as the billing location. Chris had claimed the guest closet for his belongings. 3 business suits, golf clubs, an expensive laptop, electronic gadgets I couldn't even identify. The price tags on his golf bag alone would have fed a family for a month. From the basement storage room, I retrieved 2 large suitcases Margaret and I had used for our anniversary trips to Yellowstone. The leather was still supple, the brass fittings still bright. These bags had carried happy memories once. Now they would carry something else entirely. I began with Jessie's things, folding each item with the same meticulous care I'd once used for architectural blueprints. Her wedding dress, preserved in plastic since her marriage to Chris. The photo albums from college, funded with my retirement money. The jewelry box I'd given her for her 16th birthday, now filled with pieces I'd never seen her wear. Chris's belongings went into the second suitcase. His expensive electronics, his collection of golf accessories, the leather portfolio containing RR sums and business cards from jobs he'd never quite managed to keep. Everything they'd brought into my house, everything they'd accumulated while living under my roof and planning my downfall. As I packed, I found myself remembering Margaret's words from Jessie's last visit before she got married. "That girl takes everything you give her and asks for more. When will it be enough, Thomas?" "Never," I said aloud to the empty room. "It will never be enough." I carried both suitcases to the living room and positioned them prominently in front of the couch, where they couldn't possibly be missed. The sight was striking. 2 pieces of expensive luggage sitting like silent accusations in the center of the room. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "How are you holding up, Dad? Still planning for this afternoon?" I typed back, "Everything ready? Wish me luck?" His response came quickly. "You've got this. She deserves everything that's coming to her." I settled into my recliner with the newspaper, positioning myself where I could see the front door clearly. The living room looked perfect. My 2 chairs, Margaret's china cabinet, the family photos on the mantel, and those 2 suitcases sitting like monuments to betrayal in the center of it all. At 1:45 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of their car pulling into the driveway. Car doors slammed, followed by Jessie's laughter about something Chris had said. Shopping bags rustled in their hands as they approached the front door. I took a deep breath and lowered my newspaper slightly, positioning myself for the performance of a lifetime. The key turned in the lock. "I think we got everything for tomorrow's—" Jesse's voice cut off mid-sentence as the front door swung open. The sound of shopping bags hitting the hardwood floor echoed through the hallway like gunshots. "What the hell?" Chris's voice was sharp with confusion. "Jesse, are these our suitcases?" I could hear Jessie's footsteps moving quickly across the floor, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "Dad? Dad, what is this?" she called out, her voice climbing toward hysteria. I kept my newspaper raised, savoring every second of their panic, while maintaining my pose of an elderly man peacefully reading. Then something extraordinary happened. Jessie's voice changed completely, filling with genuine excitement. "Oh my God, Chris, he's finally packed." "You mean the old man is actually leaving?" Chris caught on immediately, his voice lighting up with joy. "I can't believe it! Finally!" Jessie was practically laughing now. "He's going to Sunset Manor. We won't have to go through with the whole Dr. Henderson thing." "This is perfect." Chris was pacing now, his footsteps quick and energetic. "We can start the renovations next week. Maybe even call that contractor in Whitefish. $700,000, Chris. We're finally going to be free." They were celebrating. Actually celebrating what they thought was my surrender, my defeat, my willingness to disappear quietly from my own life. Every cruel word confirmed exactly who they really were. I slowly lowered my newspaper and looked directly at them. "No, sweetheart," I said in a perfectly clear, perfectly calm voice. "You are leaving my house." Jessie's face went white as paper. The excited smile froze on her lips before crumbling into an expression of pure horror. "Dad, did you hear me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Chris stepped backward toward the door, his eyes wide with the dawning realization of what my clear speech meant. "Thomas, how long have you been able to hear?" I stood slowly from my chair, my joints feeling stronger than they had in years. "Every single word since I got home from the hospital, 3 days ago." Jessie's hand flew to her mouth. "You heard everything we said? Every conversation about me being that old burden, every discussion about selling my house, every plan to have me declared incompetent so you could steal my life." Chris's face had gone from pale to red. "Thomas, we were just frustrated. We didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I cut him off. "I know exactly who you are now, Chris. Both of you." Jessie's eyes filled with tears, but I could see the calculation behind them. "Dad, we can explain. We were just worried about you. We thought you needed more care than we could provide. You calculated losing $700,000 of my money like it was already yours," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You planned to have me declared mentally incompetent using forged medical evaluations." "That was Chris's idea," Jessie pointed at her husband desperately. "I would never do that to you. You called me a burden, Jessica, in my own house, while planning to steal my independence and sell my home." Chris's shock was giving way to anger. "You can't just kick us out. We have nowhere to go. We gave up our apartment to take care of you." "You moved in here because you couldn't afford your own place," I replied calmly, "and now you'll learn what it's like to find one without my help." Jessie dropped to her knees beside my chair, grabbing my arm with both hands. "Please, Dad, I'm your daughter. I made a mistake, but I love you." I looked down at her, this woman who had taken everything I'd given her, and still wanted more, who had planned to destroy my dignity and independence for money. "If you loved me, Jessica, you wouldn't have called me a burden. You wouldn't have planned to have me declared crazy. You wouldn't have celebrated what you thought was my defeat." I pointed to the suitcases. "You have everything you brought into my house, everything you've accumulated while living here rent-free and planning my future. That's more than you deserve." Jessie's composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees beside my chair, clutching at my arm with both hands. "Dad, you're breaking my heart. I'm your little girl. I'm your daughter." Her voice cracked with what might have sounded like genuine emotion to someone who hadn't heard her celebrating my supposed surrender just minutes earlier. "Please don't do this to me. Mom would be devastated to see you treating your own daughter this way." That was too much. I looked down at her with eyes as cold as winter frost. "Your mother warned me about your selfishness before she died, Jessica. She said, 'Watch out for Jessie. She only comes around when she needs something. Jessie's tear-streaked face went pale. She never said that. You're making it up. She said it after you asked me for $5,000 to pay for your anniversary cruise while she was in hospice care. That's not... I never... Jessie's voice faltered as the memory hit her. Chris stepped forward, trying a different approach. Thomas, look, we all made mistakes here. But we're family. We can work this out. Jessie seized on his words, her tears switching off like a faucet. Yes, Dad, we can fix this. I'll take better care of you. We'll cancel everything with Dr. Henderson. We'll be completely different. You showed me exactly who you really are, I replied steadily, and I believe you. But people change. Jessie's voice climbed toward hysteria. Give us another chance, please. Chris's attempt at reasonableness was cracking. His face reddened as his voice rose. You can't just throw us out like garbage. We have legal rights here. Actually, Chris, you have 0 legal rights to my house. You're not tenants. You're not family members with any claim. You're house guests who have worn out their welcome. We'll contest the will. Chris jabbed his finger at me. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent. No sane person would disinherit their own daughter. I smiled calmly. Good luck with that. My lawyer has recordings of all our conversations about your plans. The blood drained from Chris's face. What recordings? You can't record private conversations without consent. Of course, there were no recordings, but the psychological effect was immediate and devastating. Jessie's eyes went wide with terror. Dad, please. We were just stressed. We didn't mean any of it. We were scared and said stupid things. You meant every word. You calculated my net worth down to the last dollar. You planned my future like I was already dead. Chris's desperation was making him aggressive. Where the hell are we supposed to go? We don't have any money. We gave up our apartment to take care of you. You moved in because you couldn't afford rent, I corrected, and that's not my problem anymore. Jessie tried one final emotional manipulation, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she'd used as a child when she wanted something. Dad, I gave up my whole life to take care of you. I sacrificed everything. I loved Mom just as much as you did. You missed your mother's funeral planning because Chris had a work party in Denver. You told me it was a big opportunity that Mom would have wanted him to attend. Jessie's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. You visited her twice during her final month in hospice. Twice. I was there every day watching her ask where her daughter was. I couldn't handle seeing her like that, Jessie whispered. But you could handle planning to put me in a nursing home so you could sell the house where she died. Something in Jessie's face hardened. The mask of the loving, caring daughter finally fell away completely. Fine, she said, standing up and brushing off her knees. We'll leave. But you'll regret this, Dad. You'll be all alone, and when you need help, we won't be there. I'd been alone for 3 years, I replied calmly. At least now I won't have to pretend I'm not. Chris grabbed one of the suitcases with more force than necessary. This is insane. You're throwing away your own family. No, I said, watching them both struggle with their belongings. You threw away your family when you decided I was nothing more than an obstacle to your inheritance. Jessie picked up the second suitcase, her face twisted with resentment. You'll see, Dad. You'll see what it's like to be really alone. I'm looking forward to it. They moved toward the front door, their expensive belongings weighing them down like anchors. At the threshold, Jessie turned back one last time. If you change your mind, I won't, I cut her off, and don't call me asking for money. The door slammed behind them with a finality that echoed through the house like a bell. I stood at the living room window, watching Jessie and Chris struggle to fit their suitcases into their Ford Escape. Chris had to rearrange bags 3 times, cursing under his breath each time something wouldn't fit. Jessie sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, her face a mask of cold fury. Finally, the car doors slammed shut. The engine turned over, and they pulled out of my driveway for the last time. I watched until their taillights disappeared around the corner, then continued watching the empty street for several more minutes. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced in years. Not the oppressive quiet of deafness, not the tense atmosphere of hidden hostility, but genuine peace. The house seemed to exhale around me, releasing 3 years of accumulated stress. I walked through each room slowly, noting the absence of their belongings. Jessie's expensive moisturizers were gone from the bathroom counter. Chris's golf magazines no longer cluttered the coffee table. The guest bedroom looked spacious and clean without their clothes scattered across every surface. In the kitchen, I found the shopping bags they'd dropped when they discovered the suitcases. I carried them to the garbage can without looking at the contents. Whatever they'd bought for their celebration of my supposed defeat could rot with the rest of their plans. I sat in my recliner in my living room in my house, and experienced something I hadn't felt since Margaret's death: complete contentment. No one was plotting against me. No one was calculating my worth or planning my future. I was alone, but I was free. My cell phone buzzed. Michael. Dad, how did it go? Are you okay? Son, they're gone. It's over. How are you feeling? Are you sure you're all right? I considered the question seriously. How was I feeling? Relief, certainly. Vindication. But mostly I felt light, as if I'd been carrying a heavy burden for years without realizing it. I feel free for the first time since your mother died. I'm proud of you, Dad. Standing up for yourself like that? Mom would be proud too. I should have listened to her warnings about Jessie years ago. Maybe, but you gave Jessie every chance to be the daughter you deserved. That's not a failure, Dad. That's love. We talked for 20 more minutes. Michael promised to visit soon, maybe bring the kids for a weekend. They should know their grandfather, he said. The real one. After we hung up, I made myself dinner, a simple meal of scrambled eggs and toast, and ate it at the kitchen table while watching the sun set through the window. No one complained about the food. No one made sarcastic comments about my cooking. No one calculated how much my meal cost or speculated about when I'd be too old to cook for myself. I thought about Margaret's voice, how she used to say, "You deserve better than that treatment, Thomas." She'd been talking about Jessie even then, though I'd been too blind to see it. After dinner, I walked through the house one more time, this time really seeing it. The family photos on the mantel told a story now. Pictures of Michael and his children, of Margaret and me on our anniversaries, of holidays when Jessie was still young enough to genuinely love her family, rather than just their money. I removed the photos that included Jessie and stored them in a drawer. Not out of cruelty, but because I wanted to remember the good times, without the bitter knowledge of how they'd ended. The mantel looked cleaner somehow, more honest. In my study, I pulled out a legal pad and began making a list. Call the bank about removing Jessie as emergency contact. Update my medical directives. Schedule lunch with old friends I'd neglected during Jessie's residency. Plan a trip to Seattle to visit Michael and the grandchildren. For the first time in years, I was planning a future instead of just enduring the present. As I prepared for bed, I thought about something Margaret used to tell me during our early years together. Some people see kindness as weakness, Thomas, but they're wrong. Kindness is strength, and when you finally stop giving it to people who don't deserve it, that's wisdom. I'd finally learned the difference. In the quiet of my bedroom, I could hear my own breathing, steady and calm. No voices plotting in the kitchen below, no footsteps pacing with barely contained greed, just the sound of a man at peace in his own home. Tomorrow, I would wake up in a house where I was wanted, where I belonged, where every decision was mine to make. I smiled in the darkness and slept better than I had in years. And me, enabling every request because I confused generosity with love. I opened my current bank statement and compared it to the nursing home costs they'd discussed. Sunset Manor at $4,800 monthly would consume my savings in less than 4 years. But that wasn't their concern. They wanted the house money up front for their new life in Whitefish. My phone sat on the desk, silent and accusatory. When had Jessie last called just to talk? When had she asked about my day, my health, my loneliness? Every conversation for the past 5 years had ended with a request. Could I help with Chris's car payment? Could I loan them money for a vacation? Could I contribute to their anniversary cruise? I thought I was being a good father. I thought I was honoring Margaret's memory by taking care of our daughter. But Margaret had seen the truth even then, had tried to warn me in her gentle way. "You're creating a dependency, Thomas," she'd said after I'd paid for Jessie's 3rd car repair in 6 months. "She needs to learn to solve her own problems." "She's our daughter," I'd argued. "We help family." There's a difference between helping and enabling, Margaret had replied, and there's a difference between gratitude and entitlement. Now, surrounded by the evidence of my misguided generosity, I understood what my wife had been trying to tell me. Jessie hadn't learned to appreciate my help. She'd learned to expect it. And when the helping became harder for me to provide, when I became the one needing care, she'd seen only a burden blocking her access to what she'd always considered rightfully hers. I looked at the photo one more time, then placed it face down in the drawer. The girl in that picture, if she'd ever really existed, was gone. In her place was a woman who would fabricate mental illness to steal my independence, who would conspire with a borrowed doctor to declare me incompetent, who would sell the home where her mother died to fund her own dreams. They thought they were so clever, planning my future while I sat upstairs, deaf and docile. They thought they were dealing with a confused old man who would gratefully accept whatever scraps of care they offered. But I wasn't confused. I was angry, and I was going to call Bob Henley first thing in the morning. I reached for my address book, flipping to the H section where I'd written Bob's home number years ago. Some conversations couldn't wait for business hours. Jessie had taught me a valuable lesson about family loyalty. Now I was going to teach her one about consequences. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. 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 Thank you for watching.